Within the current understanding of thermodynamics, there is an almost inescapable end time called heat death. Heat death is an inescapable end of time because it's built into our understanding of time itself. We all have a fairly good understanding of time just by how sequential events take place in our day-to-day lives. Time always goes forward. The past is remembered and the future is planned for. In physics, this is called the arrow of time. Time always marches forward, and therefore the arrow of time always points that direction, forward. Looking over all physics equations, surprisingly, there seems to be only one that gives us this forward direction, the second law of thermodynamics. This law states that entropy always increases. It's like the law of gambling where the house always wins. You never get back the same amount of energy that you put into a system. You always lose a little bit to friction, heat, or other forms of energy. So let's look at an ideal example to explore this second law. If we analyze the motion of a pendulum going back and forth, we start with it raised to one side. This position holds energy, as a raised object will fall with gravity. This is called potential energy. As it falls, that potential energy is converted to speed, which is called kinetic energy. Once the pendulum is at the bottom, traveling the fastest speed of the swing, it has the maximum kinetic energy of the swing. Then, the pendulum starts trading out its kinetic energy back to potential energy, climbing up the other side. Once it loses all of its kinetic energy back to potential energy, it swings back in the opposite direction, starting the process all over again. The potential energy you put in when you raise the pendulum is the same you get back when it swings back. The pendulum will never swing higher than it started. Actually, the second law means that it'll swing back slightly lower than where it started. You will always lose some energy to friction and air resistance. This is why you have to eventually wind up old clocks. This is what these clocks use to measure the passing of time. Let's take another example. A log burning in a fire pit. Burning the log, you are releasing chemical energy that's trapped inside the molecules of the log, turning that energy into heat energy. Looking at three frames, a log placed in a fire pit, a pile of ash, and a log on fire, it is simple to put these in order and say first the log was placed in the pit, set on fire, and burned to a pile of ash. That comes easy with the human experience of fires, but the only way physics proves that was the order of things is by using the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy is like another word for chaos, disorder, or mess. Seeing all of the energy piled neatly into the chemical bonds within the log is very ordered. Having some of that energy making the light of the flame and some making the heat is much more disordered. It's impossible to reverse these processes, to take the heat and the light made by the flame and use it to make the ash back into a whole log again. It would be a miracle if you ever saw this happen. The only way the tree was able to make the log in the first place was by siphoning off just a little bit of the energy released by the nuclear explosions taking place in the center of the sun. Every step there is a little energy lost. As time marches forward, everything becomes more unorganized. You cannot clean or organize something without making something else dirty or unorganized. You may wipe down a surface with a cloth, but then the cloth must be cleaned in water, which is then cleaned by a sewage system, which then needs power, usually from burning coal, which makes a big mess, and so on. Temperature is a good way to see how unorganized a system is. Burning a log, you are organizing a little pocket of heat around a fire pit. If you were to run out of wood, the fire would burn out, and the temperature will average with the surrounding area. If we were to go along with the arrow of time indefinitely, eventually energy will spread out so evenly there will be no way to do any work. The sun is like Earth's campfire. Once the sun burns out, there won't be anything to warm our solar system or make more trees. Once every sun goes dark, we burn all the wood, coal, and other sources of trapped energy. Everything will come to a standstill. The temperature of the universe will even out, just like our camp did when we ran out of fuel. It would be impossible for anything to live through this outcome of the universe. All life needs to use energy to survive, and once entropy makes all energy unusable, life becomes impossible. Furthermore, time would stop. Once entropy hits its maximum, there would be no room for entropy to increase, meaning that there would be no arrow of time and no way of keeping time. Now there is some hope that life could beat heat death and outlive time itself. The second law of thermodynamics is a little bit more bendable than most laws of physics. A more nuanced way to put it is that things tend towards disorder. Like saying if you have enough monkeys bashing on typewriters, one of them will eventually reproduce the works of Shakespeare. Over an unlimited amount of time, even the most chaotic systems will randomly fluctuate into something that appears ordered. Heat fluctuations spontaneously pop up as well. Hotter, faster moving molecules are statistically more likely to spread out evenly with the colder, slower ones, but there is a very slight probability as particles are bouncing around the room, they will randomly fall into an organized state with all of the hotter particles on one side and the colder ones on the other side. If you were to leave an empty fire pit for an unlimited amount of time, eventually the particles will randomly bump around to a place where all of the hot ones are in a pocket around the empty fire pit. The likeliness of this is very close to zero, but not zero. One could conceive of a future post-heat death life having to track these random fluctuations of low entropy in the universe and harvest them for usable energy to continue. Isaac Asimov's favorite short story of his own authorship, The Last Question, explores how a civilization will deal with heat death in a similar manner. Furthermore, there is an indication that the second law of thermodynamics could be broken. One of the most outstanding physicists, James Clerk Maxwell, came up with a thought experiment which seems to obey every law of physics except the second law of thermo, and reverses the increase of entropy. This thought experiment is called Maxwell's demon. Many physicists have tried to argue Maxwell's demon cannot exist, and many others have attempted to make one. Neither side has undoubtedly proven their case, and it is still a topic of debate and research in physics today. In my opinion, I think it's possible to build Maxwell's demon. I also feel like time is not as linear as we experience it. If we gain a better understanding of time, the whole idea of heat death might one day seem just as silly as the idea of falling off the edge of the earth. Author Richard Bach puts this idea way more eloquently in one of my favorite quotes. As long as we believe in sequential time, we see becoming instead of being. Beyond time, we are all one. Hey, thanks for watching my first video. Tell me what you think in the comments. I have a blog post where I go into a little bit more detail about heat death, and I should have another disaster for you next week.